Hello, this is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for finding me at the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel or at www.sonic-cinema.com. Earlier this year, I went to the Atlanta Film Festival, and one of the movies I saw there was Summer Night. It's a coming-of-age comedy drama about musicians in a small town, and it's very much like a lot of other coming-of-age movies, but this one I found really affecting, and it takes a lot for me to really appreciate anything in this genre, and I think they did it really well with characters that were interesting and music that was really well produced and performed for the movie. I got a chance there to speak a little bit with the director, Joseph Cross, before and after the movie. You can find that audio on the Sonic Cinema podcast episode about the Atlanta Film Festival. I got a chance to talk with him a little bit more in preparation for the July 12th release of Summer Night in Atlanta, where it's going to be playing at the Plaza Theater in downtown Atlanta, which is where I saw it at the film festival, and I'm pleased to give you a listen to that interview right now. Hello?
Hey, Brian. How's it going?
It's going well. How about you?
I'm good. Thanks for getting on a call with me.
Oh, no problem. So, had the movie already gone into release at other places, or is this the opening weekend for it?
Sorry, repeat that question?
When is this the opening weekend for Summer Night debuting, or has it been in other cities yet?
No, it's played a couple festivals, but the release is on Friday, July 12th this week.
All right, excellent. Are you nervous about it all?
I'm thrilled. I'm really excited. I feel great. I mean, there's so much work of so many great, amazing, talented people that went into making this movie. You know, as a director, sometimes you almost just feel like a vessel for everybody else's ability. So I'm really happy for all of them to have that great work recognized. And, you know, I just hope people come see the film and that they know about it so they can come see it, that they enjoy it.
What was the genesis of you making this movie starting out?
You mean why this for my first film?
Yeah.
Well, I grew up in a way that was very similar to these characters. A small town with a very close-knit group of friends, and we all had our creative ambitions that were, to varying degrees successful and frustrating and all that. And so, for whatever reason, it spoke to me. And so when I first read Jordan Jala's script, I hadn't really been thinking about directing anything. I just responded to the piece of material. So, Jordan and I just kept talking about it, and we started working on the script and improving on it. And at a certain point, I was like, I think I would want to shoot this, to direct this, if that's something that you're open to. And Jordan was, and so we phoned up his boss, or the guy he was working for, James Ponsel, at the time. I think Jordan's still working for him as his writer's assistant. And we asked James, would you read the script and talk to us about it and see if it's something you would become an executive producer on, to give us a little bit of gas in the tank. And thankfully, James was awesome and came on board, and we went from there.
Okay. When you think of, because this movie is very much a coming of age movie, like there are a lot of coming of age movies. Were there any in particular that you had in mind when you were setting out to make this movie?
Well, one of the things that I loved about the script that I thought was new to the genre was that the characters are in their early 20s. They're post-college or whatever they did during the time that people go to college. So, the movies that I had grown up on that were coming of age were all like last day of high school. They were younger. So I liked that it pushed back the age, and I thought that it gave us something unique to explore. I'm sorry, now I completely forgot what your question was.
No, it was basically, if there were any coming of age movies that you might have had in mind while you were
specific coming of age movies, right. Well, definitely I started from a position, I think that Breaking Away was a big influence on Jordan. There was a time when Universal used to make these movies as their own genre, essentially. So all of those movies informed what we did. You know what I mean? We are in the vein of that tradition.
Yeah.
And then, I spent a lot of time watching the great ensemble films and just getting to revisit all the Robert Altman movies, which was a joy. Mm-hmm. And to go from there to rewatch all the Paul Thomas Anderson movies and really get to see that influence there. I watched all the coming of age American movies that there are. I'm sure I missed a few, but I also was at the same time, to understand tone and where we fit into the canon of the genre. But I was also watching a lot of ensemble movies to understand how we could interweave storylines in a way that was fun and exciting.
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying earlier about the fact that this is kind of set in with the characters in their 20s and sort of out of school, that it didn't occur to me until you mentioned that there really are not a whole lot of movies that are set in that time frame. I mean, obviously there are a lot of movies with people in their 20s but you don't really get the idea. You don't really get a whole lot that I can remember where it's that very specific time, sort of like after school, where you're still trying to kind of figure out what your place in life is.
Yeah, and I think that it's, now we're at a time where I don't want to say everybody goes to college, but people are expected to go to college more so than maybe back, in the time of those other movies that we're referencing. So it is this time where you're left wondering, now what? What am I going to be? What am I going to do? What are my priorities? What do I want to get out of life? And, it's almost a little bit more painful post-college, I think, because you're even older, and I think expectations are much higher for people that age. People are expecting you to act like an adult, and you've got zero adult experience.
Yeah.
So, I think I didn't take a traditional 4 years of college, graduate and find a job route with my life, but I grew up on the East Coast, and most of my close friends that I grew up with, all of whom are in this movie in spirit one way or another. A lot of them, I did have a friend actually super glue his nose back together after we got a shard of glass in it from a bottle exploding in a fire pit. That's an aside, but anyway, he gets a little shout out when Callan McAuliffe's character says, "I'll just super glue it." Anyhow, I didn't take that traditional route, but I watched people who did, and my friends graduated in 2008, which was right after the credit crisis in America. So jobs really dried up, and there was sort of a lot of confusion as to what the next 10 years or 20 years was going to look like. And I just watched a lot of struggle in them, and I had it in myself as well in that time. So it made sense to me almost 10 years later when I read Jordan's script. I felt like, this is the period of life that I'm far enough away from, but still interested in enough to reflect on and meditate on as we work through the script over the course of 2 years, and all the way up until you shoot the first take, and then again between takes 1 and 2, and again between 2 and 3. So, yeah, it was an interesting period in a group of friends' life to take a look at for me.
What was the biggest? What would you say is probably the biggest challenge for you when it came to directing your first feature?
Well, I mean, there's so many. My experience, I had a lot of experience with film and television, but it was limited to on set. You know, and actors are some of the final pieces to be brought onto the project. So, you know, I felt that I could get, and I had worked with actors for so long, I felt some confidence in being able to get performances that I was happy with, and communicating with actors and being able to, you know, understand their each individual process and work within that to make everybody the best that they could be. And I certainly stumbled. I'm not saying that was all smooth sailing, but I felt some confidence in that. You know, what I really spent a lot of time understanding was, you know, with your camera work and your editing and your sound and your music, how to set a tone and a feel, and then to establish a pace and to maintain that pace. And a big part as well with this was figuring out, because it's a big ensemble, figuring out how you're going to weave those storylines together, you know, tease them all in the beginning and then flow naturally in and out of them. So I spent a lot of time working on that. Yeah, there used to be this amazing bookstore on Sunset called Samuel French. It just closed, but they had free coffee in the back, and I spent the better part of 2 years from when I met Jordan and started working with his script to when we got on set, just absorbing as much film, books about filmmaking and interviews that I could, as well as just watching lots and lots of movies.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Robert Altman. Looking at Robert Altman a lot when it came to getting ready to think about this movie. What are some of your other favorite? What are some other filmmakers that you might consider your favorites?
Well, I love Paul Thomas Anderson. I watched all of Alfonso Cuarón's movies before this because I also felt that he had sort of there's a similar flow in terms of camera movement in his style.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez, you put me on the spot. Of course, this is like, you know, the one question where it's like, you know, where do you begin? I'm trying to think of. I love Martin Scorsese's movies. I was fortunate enough to work with Steven Spielberg, and when I didn't even understand what the concept of a roaming master take was, I just remember thinking on set, like, wow, we're really moving around a lot in this scene. You know, there's a lot that he's having the actors do. There's so much more blocking on a Spielberg movie than I had experienced before. And then, you know, you start reading about the economy of the roaming master shot and, you know, what it is to accomplish something in a piece of a scene or a full scene in a single take, and what the audience gets from not having a cut. So I just, I'm trying to think of who else, but those are the things that come to mind immediately.
Yeah, there's a lot of music in this, and a lot of the movie revolves around a music bar where bands are playing and stuff like that. And one of the things that I really liked about the movie is I felt like the way that you shot the musical sequences and the way that you cut the musical sequences, there's really a lot of emotions playing within those scenes. And I really,
Thank you.
it's something that I really resonated with watching the movie. What were some of the challenges in in making those sequences come to life?
So the first, thank you, first of all, and the first, we knew that this was going to be music was going to play a very big part in this film, and so setting the soundscape early was very important. And I started working with a music supervisor named Rob Lowry, pretty much right when I started working on the script. And Rob and I were just trading music back and forth, mostly him sending me amazing music. And when we found the Whitney album, Light Upon a Lake, we felt like, okay, we've got our tone. Like, this is our North Star. We can always come back to this album, and hopefully we can afford a couple songs from it, two of which we have that close the movie up. So we started there, and then we would branch out. We branched out from there to other bands that we thought fit into that soundscape, like the Big Thief and Hop Along, the Nombe song in the beginning, the Jackie Green song in the second bar. And then from there, we had to cast bands. And we had to cast bands. I wanted to cast 3 bands that had their own unique sound, but you also felt you could believe that they came from the same place, in the country. And then each of those bands had to have a sound, had to have, songs that had the emotion and lyrics to reflect what the characters themselves were going through while they were playing in that band. So the first band, Ruby the Rabbit Foot, that Hayden Zito and Ian Nelson play in, I can't think of, a lot of the lyrics are mirroring what Ian's character is going through. So the first lyrics out of Ruby's mouth are, I know you're probably thinking of ways to be good to me. And, the last time we saw Ian with Amelie Tipton was when, she basically asks him to leave because he's just too caught up in his own life to recognize that she needs him on a deeper level. And so that, the whole time you're watching that band, hopefully, you're experiencing a little bit of what Ian's character is going through. And yeah, so then, the other bands, Roadkill Ghost Choir, sort of similar, somewhat with Justin Chapman, who's on stage, but even more so with the other storylines that we cut away to. We wanted to, that plays in the background, but it's also the music underlying the scene. So it's meant to inform that, like, the final shot of Elena Camporis when she's outside talking to Victoria Justice before we cut back to the second band. It's a very specific part of the song that I think accentuates her emotion at that moment. And, Deep State, the final band, the punk band that Callan McAuliffe plays in, they were fun. You know what I mean? They were fun. They had amazing energy. You feel like Callan's character is that kind of like sweet punk rocker, basically, and so they all just matched up. Those 3 bands that we found after, searching through a lot of different bands and those songs that they had written just matched up really well with the narrative of the movie, and they had the right sound. And all the actors learned to play those songs, which was awesome. And they did that on their own time. I'll just make an excuse right now to mention how extremely hardworking and wonderful and fantastic this cast was. It was a little movie, you know what I mean? We're probably like, our whole budget is like one day of craft service on Transformers. So when they come and do that, and not only come and do it, but put their heart and soul and everything into it, it's just, I really, really appreciate it. And I think all that hard work shows.
What was it about Georgia that made you decide to film there?
Well, I mean, I don't want to take the romance out of it, but there is a practical component of filmmaking and financing and where things shoot, for economic reasons, specifically tax incentives. And so, where you decide to film your movie may or may not give you 30% more movie to shoot. You know what I mean? So of course, when you're searching for the place that, especially with a movie of our size, comes into play, but that's, that extra bit of money is worthless if you haven't found the place that fits the story and the script. So we had an eye toward Georgia and a couple other states, but when Tara Ansley, our producer, she's from Peachtree City, she introduced me to the city or town of Noonan, Georgia, and I just felt the look was perfect, the feel was perfect. It felt like it could be. It has a bit of a timeless feel. It has a bit of an anywhere feel. There was just something really charming about that town, and it had the train tracks that I wanted, and it had a clock tower, which was a wonderful bonus. When you're making a movie that takes place over the course of one night, getting to cut back to a clock tower in a town square that you've established, that's great. So once we found Noonan, we knew where we were going.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joseph, thank you very much for speaking with me today. I really enjoyed the film. I think once when you mentioned that it was about 20-year-olds and that sort of time frame that we talked about a little bit, that doesn't really get represented a lot, and that time frame that doesn't really I think that's ultimately that might be part of the reason why it resonated with me so much when I did see it, because of the fact that it's like it wasn't just about high schoolers. It wasn't just about that natural rite of passage of going from high school to college or wherever you lead after that. It was because of the fact that it was at a point in time that I remember very vividly, after, first going into adulthood, and what is that going to look like? And so, I think you did a really great job of capturing that in a very entertaining way.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that you appreciate it, the movie reflecting on that time in life, because I felt all the same things that you're expressing. So it's nice to hear that it landed with somebody.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for talking with me today.
Cool. Thank you, Brian. Feel free to reach out to Kara if you need anything else. Oh, and last thing with the music, it's, most of that music is source music. Most of it is what the characters themselves are listening to. So that's another excuse, another way that I was able to bolster just a tiny bit, to develop a little bit more character. I mean, some things we cheat on a little bit, and some things are obviously score, but the majority of it is meant to be playing in their life. So that was the last thing I thought I'd mention on the music anyway. Well, thanks, Brian.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much to Joseph Cross for talking with me about Summer Night, which opens Friday at the Plaza Atlanta Theater on Ponce de Leon, where I actually saw it for the first time this April. That's it for now. Thank you for joining me for this special interview with Joseph Cross. You can catch the movie starting in theaters on Friday, July 12th. And it's really an entertaining movie. It touches on a time of life that isn't really represented a whole lot, and I think that's part of the reason why, for me especially, it had an impact beyond other typical coming-of-age stories. So that's it for me. Check me out on www.sonic-cinema.com for more reviews, podcasts, blogs, and more, and at the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. Thank you very much.